and welcome to the presentation today from Nan Marshall for our Conversations program. Nan is presenting Journeys to Japan today. Miss Nan Marshall is a resident of Viroqua since 2009. She has lived in Ecuador, studied in Norway, and is a graduate of Carleton College in Minnesota. Presently, she works for Valley Stewardship Network on Viroqua's Main Street. She is knowledgeable and passionate about environmental conservation and sustainability. She is also an active creative artist. Her art takes form in metalworking and mixed materials to create beautiful, unique jewelry inspired by the nature of the Driftless region. To see Nan's art, you can visit Nan's website, which is www.nanmarshalldesigns.com, or shop for Nan's art at the Viva Gallery on Viroqua's Main Street, or through the gallery's website, which is www.vivagallery.net. Nan has traveled several times to Japan, and today she is excited to debut her presentation of her second trip to Japan. So thank you again, Nan, for presenting for McIntosh Memorial Library today and for the Viroqua community. You have our full attention and the stage is now yours.
Great, thank you so much for coming to see this presentation. So these slides are from my second trip to Japan in October of 2019. I traveled to Japan for the first time in 2015 with my husband and 10-year-old son, and we went to Tokyo and Kyoto and some other areas. But this trip we went into the northern portion of Japan, and I'll be able to show you on a map here. So we traveled with a tour company called Inside Japan Tours that we had gone with the first time, and they do an excellent job. Oh, yay. So, all right, so this is a map of Japan. And so the first time I started in Tokyo here, then we went to Matsumoto and down to Kyoto and back around to Tokyo. And this time I wanted to try something a little bit different and travel in this northern portion of the main island of Japan for a variety of reasons. One of them being that the company that we traveled with developed this tour after the tsunami hit the northern part of Japan as a way to help bring tourism dollars into the area. And it was a distinct difference from our first trip, where there were very few tourists in a lot of these places that actually had really nice exhibits. So just to give you an idea, we traveled from Tokyo to Nikko. Then we went to Hiraizumi and down about here, and we went to Ishinomaki and Sendai and across to Niigata and to Sado Island, which is where the koto drummers live when they're not on tour. They're taiko drummers, and I just love the koto drummers. I've heard them several times. And then we went back to Tokyo. So that'll give you an idea of the area that we covered. So our trip began in Tokyo, and on the first day I was there, I went to the Tokyo Sky Tree, which is here, which is the tallest tower in the world, or at least it was. Maybe now there's another taller one. And it has a restaurant up here where you can go and walk around and see a full 360-degree views over the city of Japan, or Tokyo. And these are Claire and Neil, who were on the first trip I went on. And I traveled by myself this time without Jim and Ethan, but I had the company of Claire and Neil. And we had a really fancy lunch up on top of the tower, which is very different from my other meals. This is, and it's a theme throughout the whole thing. I always forgot to take the pictures of the food before I ate a lot of it. But this was in our hotel, and it was a Western style hotel. So they had a mix of Western and Japanese food for breakfast. So I already ate the noodles and the fish, and they had eggs and tater tots and fruit cocktail, all kinds of strange things. And then for lunch, we it was typical that we would go to 7-Elevens or other convenience stores and buy sandwiches. So this is teriyaki chicken with egg. And this is what's known as onigiri, which is basically a rice ball in a triangular shape with, I like the ones that had tuna and mayo in the center, and they're wrapped in seaweed. And they come in this spiffy little triangular package, which is designed so that it has plastic between the rice and the seaweed, so the seaweed doesn't get soggy. And if you follow the directions and open it correctly, it extracts the plastic and leaves the seaweed on your rice. But if you don't, you end up with seaweed flying everywhere, which is what happened to me until I figured out the secret. And then Congi, which is just milk chocolate with chocolate in it. We began the trip in the Asakusa area, which is sort of on the eastern side of Tokyo, and it's a sort of a working class area, not as fancy as the other parts of Tokyo. And we were right by the Sensoji temple. When I went the first time, there was a big festival here, so you couldn't actually get in the temple to see what it looked like on the inside. But this time I could go and peer at the beautiful gold interior. And then this is looking back from the temple towards the entrance gate over here that you would come in through as you approach the temple. And these are just some, I walked around Tokyo at night, and this was a little street show with a singer, and this guy was doing a Charlie Chaplin imitation. It was just a strange thing I didn't really understand. And just some foreigners hanging out at a bar. I was kind of puzzled by their headbands. It struck me as odd, but they're having a good time. This was our tour guide, Steve. And I showed this one because he stopped at what was called a love hotel. Love hotels are really common, and you can rent the rooms in them for a few hours or a whole night. And they're, some of them are themed, but they're not considered, seen the same way as they are in the US, because housing is so expensive in the Tokyo area that many people live with their families and their parents until they're well into their 30s and can afford a home of some sort. And so the only way they can spend time with their significant other is by going to one of these love hotels. And this restaurant was the Dancing Noodle. It's hard to see, but there's some chopsticks up here that hold dangling noodles above a giant bowl, and they bounce up and down to attract your attention. And then you go over here and you check out the plastic food models, and they have numbers by them. And you go in over here to the vending machines and you punch in your number and you put your money in, it gives you a ticket. And then you go to the lady at the counter back there, and she takes your ticket and gives you a bowl of food. And in this case, I got udon with tempura. I really love noodles, so that was one of my favorite parts of the trip. And then I was walking around a fancy section of town, and someone handed me a brochure for a Hedgehog Cafe. And I kept going, and then I thought, a Hedgehog Cafe? I have to check this out. So they have these troughs that have hedgehogs in them. And then over here, they had aquariums with hedgehogs. This actually isn't a hedgehog, because my hedgehogs just didn't want to have anything to do with me. So they gave me, this is called a lesser tenric. And it looks a lot like a hedgehog, but it's actually a relative of elephants. And he slept in my hand for a while. And then this was the sort of the hedgehog recovery tank where they weren't bothered by people anymore. But in that same area, they had an owl cafe, a meerkat cafe, a puppy petting place. Again, the homes are very, very small in the Tokyo area, and no one has any pets. And so this is the way they interact with pets. And this was kind of the glitzy area of town. This is the famous Shibuya Scramble crossing. We don't have those in the US, I don't think, but in addition to crossing straight across on the corners, you can cross diagonally across the middle. So they stop all the traffic and people just pour across the intersection. Did I say it's the busiest intersection in the world? So they advise foreigners, you just keep your head down and walk. and people will sort of part around you. It's pretty overwhelming. So next we headed up to Nikko. So here's Tokyo, and then Nikko is up here kind of in the mountains. And we stayed at the Kanaya Hotel, which was established in 1872. And they had a little museum that showed how, you know, people used to arrive in wagons and whatnot. And they had, this room was just for me. So it was a giant room. It continues way over here with a seating area and parquet floors, and it reminded me of the resort from Dirty Dancing, you know, from the 60s that people used to go to here in the mountains. And you were just followed around by help people, you know, wherever you went. You came in to the lobby. Oh, what do you need? Do you need an umbrella? Can we carry, you know, can we get you any food? What, you know, what would you like? I mean, it was kind of overwhelming. Very, and we were right next to this beautiful historic Shinkyo Bridge. Interestingly enough, we could walk by the river, but they suggested that you stop by the office first to get leech repellent sprayed on your legs before going. I chose not to. And one of my favorite things about Japan is the funny signs. This sign here was right at the beginning of the bridge. Warning, tax not allowed after termination. Alarm device in operation. No idea, but cute, very cute. And then across on the road from the bridge was the Toshogu Shrine, which is a World Heritage Site. And it's the final resting spot of Tokugawa Ieyasu, who was the shogun that united all of Japan under one leader in the 1800s, I believe. Anyway, this is a huge compound with beautiful buildings and work. I mean, they have such incredible detailed woodmanship detail in the carving and the lanterns, and there's no way I can show all of it, so I'll just show little bits of it. But there are priests that still work here and go to ceremonies. And looking up at one of the buildings, they pointed out the priests are always dressed in long white robes. So they have this giant room where they wash and press and fold all the white robes. Just more pictures of the grounds. So the next day we were supposed to go and visit some beautiful observation points over beautiful waterfalls and see a famous volcano and whatnot. But when we got there, it was pouring. So I almost didn't make it to Japan on time because they had a typhoon right before I went. And then they had another typhoon on this day, but it wasn't as bad. But they had to close the airport for a while, and some of the trains that we were going to take, we couldn't take because the tracks had been damaged. So this was just kind of an aftermath, you know, of a big storm. So instead of going up on the cable car to see nothing, I took a picture of this, what we would have seen, the beautiful waterfall and the lake back there. And we went in search of an alternative waterfall. This is where we stopped and waited. This is one of my favorite things is Japanese street food kind of, and it's, you know, food on a stick. I'm not sure why they put everything on a stick. Maybe it's just convenient that way, but, and everything in Japan seems very neat and detailed and well taken care of. And I was kind of surprised to see a guy while he was waiting for his tour group, he was cleaning off the windows of his bus very industriously. And here's our backup waterfall, which I thought was fabulous. One reason for traveling in Japan in October is the fall colors at that time. They were really just near peak and they were beautiful. We did several hikes. I mean, it was just amazing. The woods were beautiful. So this was our hike around the area. This was the Dragon's Head Falls. It's supposed to look like some kind of a dragon's head. I don't really see it, but but I have plenty of pictures. This was another backup waterfall that we visited. And then we went to the Imperial Village, still in Nikko. Emperor Akihito, the previous to the one we had, used to come here as a child. One funny thing was before going into the building and walking around, we had to take our shoes off. And they had a lot of signs up that told you to use the bathroom first because walking in socks on cold floors makes people have to go to the bathroom. And the Japanese, they don't sort of let their buildings decay. They restore them completely. They have amazing craftspeople. And this is just showing, they had exhibits showing how they restored this place. And this shows their lacquering process. So they don't always go this far, but this one had 31 layers of lacquer. And it shows what it would look like as it progressed through it. And this was just the billiards room. And this picture really is my love, shows my love of Japanese architecture. You know, I love that they have circles and these, you know, curved roofs and the wood and the gravel and the metal rain chains. There's just texture and beauty. For me, that's what I see. I just love it. I took so many pictures of the buildings. People thought I was crazy. They're just for me. Don't worry, I didn't show all of them. And on the inside, the attention to detail with the painting and the little details. And then we saw a young wedding couple who was wearing their traditional outfit as they were coming to have their pictures taken out in the garden. So next we go to Hiraizumi. So Nikko is down past the bottom of this map. So we went quite far up here. This is the furthest north we went to, Hiraizumi. And we also go to the Geibiki Gorge, which is just off to the side here. So they have this famous temple, the Chusonji Temple. They have a lot of the Jizo. These are, what are they called? Guardians of children and travelers. People see them as needing protection, you know, as children are vulnerable. So they put these, red is a color of protection from illness and danger. So they put the red caps and red bibs on the Jizo all over the country. And this place had, again, a large number of these wooden structures with shrines that people attend and pray at. We had one lady who that was her big thing on the trip. So she stayed here when we moved on and visited all the different temples. So one of the most famous ones there, the Konjikido Golden Hall, we actually couldn't see, or we couldn't take pictures of. We could see it. So it's a solid gold altar. I mean, this is something that you could walk into. And to preserve it, they've built a building around it. But we weren't allowed to take pictures, but it was pretty spectacular. And these were inside the Treasury building where you also weren't allowed to take pictures, but they're just fabulous artwork in there. These Buddhas were really, I mean, the picture of course doesn't do them any justice, but I just wanted to share that. Just a couple other pictures of the altars along the way. So this is a Goshuincho, an honorable red stamp book, and a lot of people have them. They have an accordion fold paper on the inside, and you can pay, you know, $3 or $5 when you go to a temple to get a stamp, and then they have calligraphers right there on the spot who will write calligraphy into them. So a few of us were trying to collect them, but there were so many buildings and each building had a stamp, and you know, it would have cost a fortune to get all of them. So I just got a few, but they're really beautiful, I think. And then we went to the Geibiki Gorge. The typhoon had shortened our trip by about half because first the guy would pull us upriver, and you could see he was really straining there, probably 25 people in the boat. And then there was a place where the river narrowed and the water speed was too high, and there was a lot of sediment on the banks. So we went about halfway, and we all had our little, not life vests, but you know, flotation devices with this very helpful graphic not really sure what that's all about. And it was really beautiful. The colors were more beautiful in the gorge than my pictures actually show. And then there was an altar. You could toss money into the back part here, and if it went in, a bell would ring. Oh no, is this part right here? And I'm not known for my skill at throwing things. I was one of the few people who got the bell to ring. And then after that, is on the way back down the river, because now he wasn't having to push very hard. The guy sang to us. It was really beautiful. And then we were making paper, and they showed us how to put these natural items in, and then you put more paper pulp over it, and then dye and all. It was kind of fun. And there was a cave nearby that was really amazing, but we were like the only people in the cave. As I mentioned before, a lot of the places where we went, we were the only tourists, which was kind of a shame. It's hard to take pictures in a cave, but there were a lot of nooks with these little altars, this limestone stalactites and stalagmites. And then this is looking down into a pit that was lit with water in the bottom. And these are just pictures of the houses around Hiraizumi. I just love the texture and the shapes and the attention to detail. Okay, so I did have to sneak a few pictures of architecture in. And as in much of Japan, there are often rice fields right behind people's homes. And here they had cut the rice and then they shocked it, kind of like the Amish do, on these stands so it could dry. And this is a persimmon tree over here. And this is another funny sign on some electrical thing. And I'm not really sure what it's warning you of, but it's kind of hard to take it seriously with a funny little guy. And then Claire, Neil, and I went into, this is an artist, a famous lantern artist, and he showed us how to paint our lanterns. So he wrote Genki on his, which means fine, and this was my attempt to imitate that. Oh, I should say something about our group. So Neil, when he got on the plane in Scotland, was fine. And when he got off the plane, he had somehow sprained his ankle without knowing what happened to it. And so for the first week, he could barely get around. And we also had a 91-year-old man who was very spry, but he also had trouble, like in the cave. Neither one of them went into the cave. And we also, the one benefit was instead of riding a lot of buses places, we took taxis. So our next stop, so we were up here in Hiraizumi and we came down here to Naruko Onsen, and this is the Naruko Gorge that we're going to visit. So this area is famous for kokeshi dolls. So we went to a kokeshi doll museum, and this guy is making the body on a lathe, and the head has like there's a hole in the top of the body, and the head has like a rounded ball at the bottom of it, and it snaps into the hole on the body and stays on. And then the artist here had us practice the traditional designs on kokeshi dolls in the area, which are these chrysanthemum flowers. And then we got to paint our own doll. And here we're putting the stripes on our dolls. So they spin the doll on a lathe so that you can get these stripes on them. And the museum was fairly large. I mean, they're kokeshi, each area has a different typical design for their area. And they're all displayed here. And you'll get to see my kokeshi doll. This is what my doll should look like. And there's my doll. And then this one was a doll from the Tohogata area with a very different, shape of head, different shape of body. So I got one of those too. And you'll see that area when we get there. So one of the things about Japan is when they go all in on something, when they go, they go all in. I mean, they're highly invested in the theme. And so there were kokeshi doll bollards and kokeshi doll statues and kokeshi doll mailboxes. Everything in the area featured kokeshi dolls. And this is just kind of the surrounding area with the big fields and the mountains. And you can kind of see that the buildings are a little more run down up here in this northern area. in the 80s, people would come to the ski resorts and visit a lot, and now people don't come anymore. It was interesting, in Tokyo, they mentioned that people buy cars and they only keep them for 5 years because then they think they look decrepit. And so then they sell their cars, and those cars are sold to other East Asian countries like Korea and all that are happy to have these slightly used cars. But in Tokyo and all, you won't see any rundown vehicles. And this is that beautiful gorge with the fall colors. So nature is really important for the Japanese, and you may be aware of the cherry blossom time in the springtime, and they have a name for that season, and people go out and they eat under the cherry blossom trees, and they go view them at night in the moonlight and all these special things. Well, fall also is special. So people would come to this gorge from Tokyo just to see these fall colors, and then they had all the food areas and the cotton candy and whatnot. And so Claire and Neil wanted to eat all the weird things they could. So he ate a blue candy covered banana. And this is just some of the little houses in the area as we continued on our way. So we did go to Hell's Valley, and they have this very helpful sign, which, as my son Ethan said, means don't slip in the water, watch for hot lava, and don't pick up the hot burning potato. It was Naruko Onsen is known for their hot springs. They have 9 hot springs, and each one had a different temperature and therapeutic value. So there's a lot of volcanic activity. So as we walked down the path, we could see steam emanating from all sorts of cracks and fissures in the rock. And there's a nice fumarole here, and people come to this area, and the water is really quite warm, and you can cook your eggs in the water or your potatoes. And then the trail kind of ended abruptly. You can see the trail actually used to continue on, but all of a sudden there was this geyser that started happening there. So that's as far as you could go. And then we went to the Naruko Dam. And another interesting little guy pointing out the dam. And here's the dam. And then on the other side, there's the beautiful reservoir. It was a lovely evening. And there was this band playing Sweet Billie Jean, and there were all these empty chairs, and I felt really terrible that the band had come and they were playing and no one was there, and all these chairs were, and so we were dancing to the music. And then it turned out we were just early, they were just rehearsing. So this is the rice, it's kind of like, I don't know, the 4-H club kind of for adults. Anyway, they were the rice group in the area, and the people were coming later, and they offered us amikaze, which is a non-alcoholic rice drink, like sake without the alcohol. And they had these rice dishes that they offered us, and they thought we were really funny. So next we head down to Ishinomaki city here. And Ishinomaki is, so the March 11th, 2011 earthquake, the epicenter was out here. And so this entire area was highly affected by the tsunami. And I just wanted to show you that there's the shape of this bay. So the waves came in and they hit here and they kind of ricocheted back in here. And there's a river that goes up here. And this area was really destroyed, basically. So I'm going to show a couple pictures of the tsunami happening, and then some of the in-town effects. So here's the tsunami coming into the Ishinomaki area. I just saw a video of it yesterday that went back and looked at, we walked down the street in Ishinomaki. I mean, it's been many years now, so it's a lot nicer looking. So this is the Tsunami Center, and this was the height of the water in town. So that was probably, so this is the ocean out here, and they had a model in there, and they're back in here somewhere. And this area down here was all residential housing that is no longer there. And there's a hill back in here that we're going to go up and visit later, right up on top here. So kind of controversially, so the depth of the water was 21 feet in this area down here. So what they're turning it all into a park, and they're building a 21-foot high seawall out here. And it's controversial because in some places the seawall got destroyed and then pieces of it were kind of smashed through the houses. So some people think it could be more dangerous than not having a seawall. And here we are on that point. This white building you'll see in another picture, I think it was the hospital. So, but most of this area is just uninhabited at the moment. They're working on building the park. They haven't gotten there yet. And this is just to show how high it is, the stairs. So the stairs were here, and you could come up on the backside of this hill because the water, there's a river right here, and the water came straight up. There's no stairs on the backside of the hill for people to use to escape, and they still haven't put any in. So here's that white building that was the hospital. This was what it looked like before in that area and what it looks like now, just after the tsunami. And this was all the houses in that area that's going to be the park, and this was after what was left. There was a school at the base of the hill, and the adults were conflicted about what to do, and some went the wrong way, and it didn't turn out too well for them. And they were right at the base of the hill. Some of the kids did run up the hill. And this is looking the other way off the hill. And you can see this spaceship thing, that's the Manga Museum. And it's still there today, so it survived. That was nice. It was a little out of order, but when we drove into town, these were some of the FEMA houses that they put up for evacuees to live in. And this is we visited that park area. There's a memorial there. And this is right past the area where obviously now these are brand new residences that they've put in where a lot of the refugees moved into these homes. I just thought it was strange that they put them so close to the area that was damaged before. And so right after, when they started cleaning up that area, they put up this sign that says Ganbaru, which kind of means, you know, let's pull it together. We can do it, sort of. So here's the little altar they have there, and there's the sign. And they've actually had to replace the sign twice now, but everyone wants to keep it up because it was such a touch point for the recovery. And the top of this sign here is the 21-foot mark. That's how high the water was in that area. But Ishinomaki is home to a famous manga artist, and they are all in. So around town, you see these little lovable figures he's created on top of the mailbox and in their manhole covers, which are very decorative throughout Japan. They feature the Manga Museum. And we went to the museum. That's they had all this kind of fun guys sticking through the walls and out in front. And inside, so Neil and, I mean, I like anime and manga, but Neil and Claire are huge fans, and they're huge Gundam fans, which are kind of like Transformers in a way, that you build these creatures. So they had an exhibit for Gundams, and then they showed how like some of the characters' helmets changed over time, and this big display of the family of the superheroes that the guy had developed. So it's kind of fun. After that, we went from Ishinomaki here around to Sendai. Here's Sendai City, but this is part of Sendai, and this is Matsushima Bay right here. And then we go to Sendai. So this is the Ensuin Gardens, and they just beautiful. And more of the Jizo statues. And I just love these gravel Zen rock gardens, and just some ladies hanging out. And here is one of their altars, and you can buy little wooden plaques and write prayers on them and hang them up. Or you can use paper and tie them onto these poles here with your hopes for yourself. Speaking of the fall, you can see all these lights. There are lights throughout the entire garden. And one of the things they do is they have these light festivals where you come at night and they have colored light shows that illuminate the entire gardens. And these are they had some of the older tombs in the caves, and then they had sort of a more modern cemetery there. And then people love to come to these places in their traditional clothing. And they had ice cream. They had probably 30 flavors. I got jellyfish ice cream, which again, I took a picture of after I started eating it, but you can see little pieces of jellyfish in what's basically vanilla ice cream. White coffee, grating apple sherbet, and Claire and Neil had black sesame ice cream. It was black. There's a gold museum I went to later on, and I had ice cream with gold bits in it. And this is just because all the temples are made out of wooden buildings, basically. So they have these buckets out, so you can, if a fire should break out, you can help put the fire out. So then we went to Matsushima Bay, which is known as Nihon Sankei, one of the 3 great sites of Japan, which was, these 3 sites were determined in 1643 by Hayashi Gaho, who was just kind of walking around. So there are probably many other great sites of Japan, but those were the 3 that he determined at that time. And the bay is full of these islands, sandstone islands, and some have little altars on them, and they're just beautiful. I have tons of pictures of them because they all were beautiful to me, but now you can look out over the bay. And we took a ferry across the bay. And we got to Sendai. We spent some time there. And then we headed off to look at the Zao Onsen. Onsen means bath, dairy farm on our way to Niigata. And I was all excited to see a dairy farm coming from Wisconsin. I wanted to see how they did it. And there's a sign, and there's a business center. And I thought this was like just sort of a general representation of what we would see animal-wise. I thought we'd see a bunch of cows, and nope, that really depicts exactly what we saw. Those are all the animals there were. The cows were apparently in some totally different area. We did not see any cows. But once again, people don't have a lot of animals of their own, and so they bring their kids out here to see what life on a farm is like. I like the tractor that was all penned in there. And we stopped at Toagata Onsen. We didn't go up to the hill to the shrine, but they had one there. And this is where I bought my other Kokeshi doll. So it was traditional to their, it's kind of just a small little rundown town. But it had this fabulous foot bath. There were community members that we were talking to, but I didn't take their picture. And it kind of had different steps, and the water temperature changed depending on where you sat. And this is Tim, our 91-year-old adventurer. And another funny sign, it's on a street curb, and it says, "Stop, look both ways." Not just a big red sign. And then they had the Glutton Cafe and Bunny. I have no idea what kind of building Bunny was, but it made me laugh. And then we headed out through the mountains again. This is Katadake Peak, which was really desolate looking. We were on our way up to the top of a volcano. It had these weird little grassy islands. And it was super windy and cold up there. So we walked down to this little observation deck, and the wind was blowing so hard we could barely walk up onto it. And then we are on top of the volcano at the lookout point, looking for the Okama crater lake. And I waited and waited and waited and waited. The guide said only 2 times out of 5 do people get to see the lake. And I went in and I came out one last time and the clouds cleared and I saw something. Maybe it's a lake, couldn't tell. So then we moved on from Sendai. We were heading this way down to Niigata City, which is a fairly big city on the western coast of Japan. And we went to the Saito family summer villa, another beautiful home and garden. This is in their warehouse section with these, it's a ladder up into the top of the warehouse, and all the tatami mats and the beautiful carving on the wood. And a nice way to welcome like the indoors into the outdoors. You know, they just open the shoji screens and let the nature in. It was really beautiful. And then we went to a little local cafe. We went to a lot of really nice small local places to eat. So there were only 2 tables in the place and we took up both of them. So it's nice. And this is in Niigata City itself. And this is a sake tasting room. So you get 5 tokens and a cup. You put the tokens in and you can sample one of their 120 types of sake. And this is the city itself with a big river running through it. And I wandered around for a while and I found this like tiny little artisan street. This room actually is twice the size most of the rooms were. She was a potter and she had a little display area here. This is a glass blower. There were like restaurants that had a counter with 2 stools on them. There was a grocery store that was probably only like as big as this back part here up to there. And it had 1 shelf with 5 vegetables on it. But they were celebrating artwork by people with disabilities. So there were a lot of people touring and they were outside on the street and in the different shops. That was kind of neat. And then we took a ferry across to Sato Island, which took about 2.5 hours. And we came back by hovercraft, which took 30 minutes, but it was kind of cool. So there's the ferry. And this guy's kind of interesting because he had a gong. And so when we took off, before we took off, the last thing that happened was he struck the gong 3 times. And they had different levels of accommodation. So actually, if you really were on the cheap seats, you just had a floor to lie on, the rug. The next level up was you got a futon to lie on. We were supposed to be in the rooms like this where you had sort of a reclining back to your futon. But there was a mix-up, and in the end, we got to stay in the staterooms up in the top with, you know, walk-in bathrooms and beds and balconies to look out, which was kind of nice. And this is our guide on Mr. Yuki on Sado Island. He was kind of a character, which was unusual for as far as Japanese go, as far as we could tell. So the first place we went to was sort of this antique fishing village that's historic and it's been preserved. And this is the workshop for this guy here who makes these tugboats. And they're traditional for fishing in these sort of rocky volcanic waters where the water is really shallow because they have shallow bottoms and they can turn on a dime. They just spin, but he has a T handle and it goes down to a long oar underwater and it's just held on by this strap and you turn it back. Well, you can see the strap over here better. And you just move it back and forth in a figure 8 and the boat moves forward really quickly. It was really quite surprising. And this is the fishing village, which people still live in, mostly retired people. The young people all are moving out and they can't really change the exteriors because it's historic, but inside most people have pretty modern homes. This was just one of the shops that's open for tourists. And so she had her traditional kitchen laid out here with a sink and a well. Yeah, there's the well. And this is in the living area where she just has a few shelves and her futons laid out. And then they had the cemetery in the caves. They had a modern cemetery as well. And then we got to go visit the Kodo drummers. We had a drumming workshop where we got to play the drums. This was made from a tree root and was called Big Snout. And then this was just one of the more traditional giant koto drums. I love drumming and koto drummers, so I had a blast there. And then we stopped at a local high school. They were doing a practice for a dance that they did every year. And so we got to watch them practice. And these hats are designed because there's a gold mine, which I'll show you later on Sato Island. And you weren't supposed to look up and see the overseer by looking him in the eyes. So the hats protect you from ever looking at the overseer. So here's the gold mine. And this V notch here was made by hand by miners just digging over time into the mountain to extract the gold. But eventually they had this funny animatronic design inside the mine where we got to walk around and look, where they dig out the gold and put down these chutes, and these would tumble to help separate the gold from the dirt. And then they had their meetings in there, and they would sleep and eat in there. And as it says, it was the largest gold mine in the world for a short period of time. And this was in the shop, or they had a museum part too. So they had an actual bar of gold here, and you could reach in and grab it, and it was really heavy. I mean, it was almost impossible to get your fingers under it. But if you could, then you could try to pull it out through this hole here. And it's sort of like the monkey with the nut, where if you're holding the nut, you can't get your hand out. It's a dilemma, but I thought it was impossible. Neil was able to actually lift the bar of gold and get it to the hole, but not get it out. And they actually had already had 5 people that year get the gold bar out. You didn't get to keep it though, unfortunately. And here were samples of the gold coins that they made in the mine. This is hard to see. It was kind of taken from above at an angle, but if you sort of try to picture it flat, this is actually a 3-dimensional layout of the inside of the mine. So these are the various tunnels and levels that they have inside the mine. And this was the kind of the washing and processing area of the mine outside. So it's kind of interesting. They have these displays and museum exhibits that are really amazing. And what they would like to do is have this be a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but every country can only nominate one for that status every year. And so last year or the year before I went, they had nominated 4 for Japan, and this one wasn't one of the final ones. But it's interesting that you have to kind of keep it, you can't clean it up completely or it loses sort of its historic value. So they have to try to keep it at this sort of same level of disrepair. And this was the overseer's house. And this one they've completely redone inside and out. And then they have a beautiful museum attached to it that, you know, shows the whole gold mining process. And again, no one was really there but us. And these are just some pictures around Sato Island. And then we went to the Ibis Sanctuary. And so there were ibises in Japan, and they got down to the final 7. And then they decided to try to preserve them. Here's one of those, and they died. Fortunately, China had some that were the same genetic stock. And so they brought them over. And the only place where there's a suitable habitat for them is on Sato Island. So they raise them here, and then they train them to live in the wild. So we did see ibises flying around outside in nature in the fields. Now this is a sake manufacturing building. So this is an old cedar ball, but when they put a nice fresh green one up, it means that the sake is ready. And the guy told us that all their water came from this mountain. He went on and on about this mountain and the water and how the water came down. And it took 40 years to get from the snow on the top of the mountain into the groundwater. And that's what they used to make their sake. And they have their rice and bottling and polishing. This is they polish the rice. So they actually had a table here showing the different levels of rice polishing. And then this was a room that normally we would have toured, and they actually have you clean your shoes off ultrasonically before going in, but the sake was in a very sensitive portion of the process. So they were worried about raising the garage door to let us peek in. So that's all we saw. And then it ends up in these giant tanks out here. And this is just the view from my hotel room on Sato Island, looking out over the bay. So it wasn't a traditional hotel in the sense that it wasn't a little ryokan or little inn, but it was a traditional style hotel. So our rooms in this high rise were traditional. So with the tatami mats and the table laid out, and then at night they move the table aside and lay your futon out to sleep. And for the bathrooms, it has the shower room. So before you bathe, you shower, you have to bathe, get all the soap off yourself. And then there's a deep soaking tub over here. And then in the toilet room, so you have slippers that you wear in your room and around the hotel, but not on the tatami. You don't wear slippers on the tatami, just socks. But in the toilet room, there are toilet slippers. So you have to, when you go, you take your other slippers off, you put on the toilet slippers, you go in, and then as you back out, you leave your toilet slippers there and put on your regular slippers. And heaven forbid you be caught wearing your toilet slippers around the hotel. They're actually a different color, so everyone knows you've made a terrible mistake. And then every room comes with these yukata and belts and toiletries and little bags when you go to the these hotels have onsens, or hot springs that are big, that are communal, that you can go to. So I have to say, when we arrived at this hotel, they watched us very carefully as we came in, and within minutes, a lady knocked at my door and she brought larger yukata because she had perceived that the ones that were in the room were not going to fit me. I never had that happen before. And again, I took the picture too late. This is what's called a kaiseki meal. It's a breakfast so when you have a traditional hotel, they give you these traditional meals with 47 little dishes. These are probably not even all the dishes of food. And you get miso soup, but you get rice and fish and eggs and beef and salmon. And by the end of the tour, you're just so stuffed you can't eat. And a lot of the people stopped coming down to breakfast, but I really felt like they were making such a big effort, on our behalf. So I would, and then that's why eating lunch, just eating an onigiri rice ball for lunch is way more than enough. And then they put on dances at the hotel in the evening that we got to watch. And then I'm at the end now, but it was kind of funny on TV. Something was going on in North Korea. And so despite, Japan is highly technological, but they have a little guy stand and move stickers around his board. So when Trump did something, he would bring Trump over and then he would take him off the board and move the little troops around to show exactly where they were. Cracked me up. And then my final image is this guy. I have no idea. I have no explanation, but that's just Japan for you.
All right. How about a round of applause for Miss Nan Marshall here? Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm happy to answer questions if you have any questions.
Yeah, Nan, I think that would be a great idea to move into that portion of this presentation. I would recommend that if somebody would like to ask Nan a question or tell her something that you've learned from her program today, if you are willing to turn on your video camera and say your name and where you're joining us from today, and then to ask your question to Nan. I can go ahead and start. Nan, I thought that it was just really so interesting to see how you arrived to Japan and you were in a very modern city and you were even at the top of a skyscraper tower having a very modern, very posh meal. But then through your journeys, you were able to travel to more traditional sites and to really explore some of that heritage that they have there. And I really enjoyed seeing you so happy in all of the photographs that were taken of you. You just look so happy and really present in the moment of your travels and creating memories that will last you a lifetime. I also really enjoyed seeing all the different art and crafts that you did, from the dolls to the paper making and the pottery and the painting of the lanterns. It seems that art and nature, were exploring the nature of northern Japan, was really pretty big focuses of your journey. Um, I also learned about the gold mining in Japan. I had never thought, oh, do they mine gold in Japan? So I learned about that from you today, and I also learned about the process of countries nominating their UNESCO World Heritage sites, which I also thought was very interesting. And my question for you, Nan, is, I guess also being a Wisconsinite, a fellow Wisconsinite, is, can you tell us more about the jellyfish ice cream?
It just tasted like vanilla, I have to say. And then it had chunks of fish in it. And they also had like whitefish ice cream. They had a whole variety of them. I almost put in the slide that showed all 30 different types of ice cream, but
Mhm.
they're very inventive, I'll say.
I'd say so.
Oh, I
But
should.
that's a part of it, I think, is exploring all the different tastes and flavors, um, and being curious about some of the more interesting ones, like jellyfish ice cream.
So speaking of World Heritage sites, the last couple days we were there, there's a huge, beautiful temple on Okinawa that burnt to the ground while we were there. And, you'd see people standing there crying, they were sobbing, they really have meaning for people. I think it had burnt before, but, they immediately begin plans to rebuild it. It's already underway to build it back to exactly the way it was before. But
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of shocking, and it just shows how fragile those old wooden buildings are.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be 300 castles, the old shogun castles, and there are only 12 left.
Oh, wow.
We saw some the first time, so it's hard to preserve that tradition, but that's what fascinates me, is kind of that mix of the new, the technology, and the new and the old. They move between, Shintoism and Buddhism and these different religions,
Mm-hmm.
living in tiny spaces and loving nature. And somehow it doesn't seem fragmented. It's just one big picture for them.
Yeah. Thank you for answering my question and for your comments, Nan. Really appreciate it. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Yes, indeed, please go ahead.
I was curious when they were the largest gold mine in the world, for one thing. Do you have any idea?
Oh, shoot, I don't remember.
1800s or something?
Yeah, 1800, something like that. It was.
How about the cemetery that was in the caves? When did those people die? Was that really, really old?
Yeah, I think it's really, really old.
Okay. And also something that always impressed me in Japan was there were so many people and so little land that they really made use of every inch. And then for them to have all those large gardens, it's
Right.
really, what land isn't so precious. They must really have a tight control, the government, somebody does, that it's not sold off and turned into housing or something.
Yeah, they do have a lot of rules about that to preserve the forest. They have, and the mountainsides. But the little cities, they're kind of, in a way, they're like Baroque, surrounded by bigger mountains. But there's a limit to how much they can expand. So I think that helps protect things as well.
Okay, thank you for your questions today, Cindy. It looks like Roberta is waving, or she has a question today. Go ahead.
Sure. It was a great presentation, Nan. And I thought it was a great tour because you got to do things besides just look at things. That would be a great tour to go on. I'm interested in how you came to take these tours of Japan. What was intriguing about Japan to you that you chose to go there?
So for some reason, I've always been intrigued by Japan. It's beautiful, the design really speaks to me, the houses and everything. And I never thought I would get there. I went to Indonesia once because it was much less expensive. But in 2014, the year before we went, I have a strange love of sumo. My husband and I used to watch it on TV in the 90s, and then it went away. And and finally in 2014, it occurred to me that everything's on YouTube. And I started watching sumo wrestling again. And we were talking about taking a trip. And we had sort of a little financial windfall. And I started looking at family trips to Japan. And I found one by the same tour company called Hands On Japan. And we did a lot of things on this trip, but on the Hands On Japan trip, we did indigo dyeing, we made pottery, we planted rice. So, we had way more experiences even than on this trip. And I thought, wow, with a 10-year-old, that would be great to have something to keep him involved and intrigued. And so we just happened to take the trip from this company, and the guides are marvelous. They attend to every detail. They make sure you always know what you're doing. And for us to have a 10-year-old, we wanted in Japan where we didn't speak Japanese, we really wanted to be taken care of in that way. And it was fabulous.
Oh, wow. Oh, it looks like Cindy has another question.
Well, I could ask a ton of questions. This was very interesting, Nan. You did a very good job. You did overdo the photos. You explained. It was really nice. I was going to say, it seemed to me from the pictures that there were a lot of signs that also had English on them. And in the early 80s, the first time I was there, first few times I was there was not English. And you really had to be careful when you took a train or a subway. You could really get lost. So I was glad to see all that English.
Yeah, they definitely in Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, any of the bigger cities, there's a fair amount of English and on the trains and transportation. But the first time we were in Tokyo, we were in Kyoto. We took a local bus to find a movie studio, the Samurai Film Movie Studio. And we discovered there are no street signs in a lot of Japan. And they certainly didn't have English on them. And we had a map and it had little pictures. And so we started matching up to figure, we didn't even know if they knew where we were going, for one thing. They were like, oh, look, there's a temple on the corner. And we'd find it, like, we think that's this one. And there's a park. Oh, yeah, it has to be. And that's how we navigated, because we couldn't actually match names up. They don't even have street names on the map. So even if we could have matched them up. So once we were in the country, there was a lot less English.
Well, thank you, Nan, for answering that question for us all. Thanks for the question, Cindy. Monique, who was in attendance today, she said that she has to head out for the day, but she thought just what a fantastic presentation, incredible photographs, and interesting storytelling. And a big thank you to you, Nan, and also to the library. And she wishes us to enjoy the snow today. Janelle is also letting us know that they've got to head out for the day, but a big thank you to you, Nan, and to the library for taking us on this virtual personal tour. We really enjoyed it. Yeah.
So now that little Olive isn't listening, I can tell if anyone wants to hear, I could tell the story of the school. So the only, most of the children in the school when the tsunami hit, and there were 74 that died in the tsunami, and all but one died in that one school. There was only one child that died in a different school. And so they had a warning that a tsunami was coming, and they're right by this giant hill, but they came outside and the teachers were looking at their evacuation plan, and it was an old one that had boilerplate where it didn't tell them what to do specifically for their school. So they were all standing around discussing it, and some kids came out and yelled, "Up the hill, let's go up the hill." And they were told no, that they should stay. And some other parents came, and then they kind of at the last minute someone said, oh, we should head across the bridge to the other side. And so they started running toward the river, and the wave came toward them, and they tried to turn around, and only 2 boys made it far enough up the hill to survive the tsunami.
Yeah.
Really, really sad.
Yeah, I think, obviously that is extremely tragic and very heartbreaking and sad. And I think, Nan, that by explaining to us that you went to visit that area, I think from what I heard during that part of your presentation is that it evoked a lot of compassion for the people of that area and for all citizens of Japan as well. And that it also maybe perhaps, and I don't want to speak for you, but I know in my own travels that being close or involved to that sort of crisis scenario is a very real aspect of our shared humanity. And in that as well, sometimes with travels as a foreigner, we can be kept from some of those more real, very real situations. And so I think to really have expanded your willingness and availability to connect into the land and the people who are of that land's experiences as Japanese people, that you set yourself there for an experience. And I think it's important as well that you shared that, so we here in our area of the United States can take some time to be thoughtful towards that as well. So thank you for including that in your presentation. Yeah.
I'm glad it seemed okay, because at first I wasn't going to, and then I threw it in.
And-
Can I
please,
ask a question?
Sure.
please, yes, please.
Oh, like this?
Well, yeah.
What do I do?
You're ready.
I can see you.
Oh, okay.
You have your hand over the
Oh, I
camera.
got the hand on the camera.
We can see you.
Okay. So I was wondering, Bill Map here. What? Am I on the cafe again? Okay. Terrific presentation, by the way, because I love Japanese stuff. But I was wondering, I'm a big fan of Frank Lloyd Wright and Japanese prints. And I noticed you had a lot of things about the architecture and the dials and so forth. I was wondering, did you see much in the way of like screens and prints and that sort of thing?
Yeah, are you talking about the woodblock prints in particular?
Yeah, woodblock prints, yeah. But also screens.
Yeah, I love the shoji screens, and they had many beautiful screens. On the first trip, I went to an Ikiyoe museum, which is a woodblock print museum,
Oh, yeah.
which is really spectacular. But yeah, there were many of the woodblock prints around. They're just, I think they're just amazing. I actually am lucky because at Pleasant Ridge, they had a silent auction for the holiday fair one year, and someone had donated a late 1800 woodblock print. And so I have that hanging on my wall right over here. And someone gave me 2 sort of beginning woodblock prints, Japanese, and so I have them in front. So I really love those. The museum was great because it actually showed a video of how they replicate some of them and how they make them. And you can see them, like when people have strands of hair in those pictures, like cutting the finest little strand of hair, and the different layers of the printing, and getting them to line up right. It was just amazing. And they do it all seated on the floor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The other thing, you were talking about calligraphy, and you had a calligraphy teacher, and you were doing some with the dials and that sort of thing. I'm no expert, obviously, but it seems to me that the Chinese are more into that kind of thing, or were the Japanese more with the Shinto? Is that sort of a spiritual type of thing or whatever?
So the Japanese are equally into the calligraphy. It's really an important part. We didn't get into that a lot, but I know when they have those festivals at the temples, and they had one I went to, they had like 5 guys they're, doing the calligraphy in everybody's books. And the Shinto religion is huge. The festivals we went to, everyone comes to them and they have incense burning, and you try to get the smoke to come towards you. Like if you have a headache, you want to go to your head. They really, they believe it, but it's sort of not in a way that necessarily affects their daily modern life, but it just is woven in these rituals in traditional moments where they really participate in them wholly. I don't know. It's very different from the way religion is practiced here in the US, I feel.
That's such
Well,
a
I just wanted to thank you. It was a terrific presentation.
Thanks,
Oh,
Nan.
glad you guys came. There weren't too many slides. It's the first time I've done it, so I didn't.
It was great. It was so wonderful. Yeah, I think your audience all has a very big round of applause for you. It was really nice.
Thank you so much for coming out. And
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see if there are any other questions. Otherwise, we can move into closing remarks for the presentation today. Okay, very good. Well, I would like to thank you again, Nan, on behalf of McIntosh Memorial Library for your presentation today for our Conversations program, which is a bi-monthly discussion group that happens here at the library. And Nan's presentation today, Journeys in Japan, is also for January East Asian Heritage Month, which is the first month of the library's year-long, all-ages humanities program, which is entitled Creating Community Beyond Biases, Library Resources. If you'd like more information about that, you can look on the library's website and or on the library's Facebook page. Thank you, Nan, again so much. If anyone thinks of any questions they would like to ask Nan, you can email me at the letter L period Sheldon at WRLSWEB.org, and I can get those questions to Nan. Thank you again. Nan, is there anything else you would like to add for your presentation today?
no, just thanks to everyone for coming and listening. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Nan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye, everyone. Have
Bye.
such a nice day.
Bye.